we go. So I'm going to start shortly. And okay. So good morning, everybody, and good morning, Amanda. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you, Jackie.
That's great, and thank you for taking the time on a Monday morning to have a bit of a chat to me about your author journey.
Yep, looking forward to it. It's a bit chilly down here today, but other than that, I'm warming up to it.
Oh, fantastic. Well, welcome everybody, and I'm Jackie Lane, the book advisor, and today I am having a chat with Amanda Fisher, who's written 4 books, but primarily we're going to focus on her latest book called Strangled by the Numbers. And so before we get into that, I'll just give you a bit of an intro to Amanda. Amanda, on your website, you say that you're an author, consultant, financial educator, tech geek, and passionate numbers person. You've also been in business for over 30 years, like me. And I love your comment that that you've learned the shortcuts and the best outcomes, and also found the less successful methods that you probably wouldn't attempt a second time. And that really resonates with me too. I think when you get to a certain age in business, there's a lot of mistakes you've made, and you really want to help other people not make them. So your latest book, Strangled by the Numbers, was the book I wish I'd had when I'd started my business back in 1989. And as you say in the introduction to that, numbers don't lie. And it's important to understand what numbers. And for me, the message I got out of your book was what ratios are important and what they're telling you. So I thoroughly enjoyed your book and learnt a lot. So with that intro, I'd like to delve a bit more into your business book journey. And before we do that, so what are you working on right now?
I'm working on a number of things at the moment. As always, somehow, I always seem to have my fingers in many pies. But my big overarching message is that numbers are so important for every single business owner to know and understand what they mean and how to use them to make good decisions. And to that end, what I'm working on is looking at is working with other people to develop partnerships, to develop different channels where my message can get out to a broader audience. So I'm looking at more of the how can my information be, in places where people will more readily find it and be able to consume it and get the lessons, the learnings, the information that is just so vital for business success.
And that's a really good point you make, Amanda, because, I'm really passionate about sharing knowledge. And when somebody wants to write a book, really effectively, it's about them wanting to share their knowledge. Yet so many authors, particularly business book authors, kind of stop when they've launched their book. And I say to a lot of people, that's just really the beginning of your book journey, even though you think it might be the end. It's what you do with that knowledge afterwards that, really kind of is going to be that thing about getting your message out. Your latest book, Strangled by the Numbers, Unlock the Secrets to Your Business Success, was launched in 2020. And I was at that launch and it was a virtual one. Yep. It's actually your 4th book. And your 3rd Amazon bestseller. That's pretty impressive. What was the motivating factor for you to write and publish your 4th book? Aren't 3 enough?
Oh, look, I'll tell you a little secret, or perhaps it's not so secret, I'm not sure. But, I'm not one of those people who ever had this big dream of writing a book. And so the reason I'm kind of smiling and chuckling quietly to myself about this is that, to have a 4th book is just crazy, like absolutely sort of surreal, nuts, crazy. I'm not quite sure what the right words are, because I never, how some people say, oh, we always wanted to write a book. That was never me. I mean, at school, maths, sciences, they were my best subjects. English kind of languished down the bottom of my rankings of, how well I did. I still did okay, but, it was always my least marked subject. So I do think my high school English teachers would be amazed at what I've done. But so, yeah, it was never something that I really wanted to do. But Look, my first book was about cloud accounting, and it was very topical at the time. It to me had a sort of a very limited lifespan, if you like, because once that became more mainstream, the book became a little less relevant, although it's still relevant, but not as important. My second book was Unscramble Your Numbers, which was more, if you like, not quite the textbook, because I don't like it being a textbook, but the real nuts and bolts of what the numbers are and kind of how to look at them, how to find them, what they are, how to calculate them. And I wrote another book for accounting practices, which we won't mention because I'm not really interested in that one. So the trilogy, if you like. So the third one is the current book. Yep. Strangled by the Numbers. Yep. Me strangled on the cover. And the reason I wrote this one is because it comes back to what you touched on earlier, that it's about those lessons I've learned, those mistakes I've made. Yes, I've been in business for more years than I'm going to really recognize and acknowledge. And I've bought businesses, I've built businesses up, I've sold them, I've worked for other people. I've had a whole range of different experiences over my working life. And I've made the mistakes, and I've made costly mistakes, ones that have cost hundreds of thousands of dollars in mistakes. And why? Because I didn't know any better, because I didn't have someone, I didn't have a mentor. I didn't know mentors existed when I was much younger. So I never had a mentor until more recently. I've got the few odd ones floating around. But I'm a chartered accountant. And I think, I know I was brought up, at least at a time then, it may not be quite so the case now, but the time when I was brought up in the chartered accounting industry, you were a professional, you knew what you knew, you acknowledged when you didn't know and had to go and research and find answers. But to maintain that professional stature, you couldn't make a mistake. It wasn't acceptable that you would make a business mistake and still be able to give advice. So that vulnerability that is, I think, so important to connect with people was something that was, if you like, bred out of me or brainwashed out of me, I'm not quite sure, but that was my education in the professional industry was, you don't ever show any lack of confidence, any lack of, let's say if someone asks a technical question, you don't know the answer, absolutely you say, I don't know the answer, I will get advice or I'll go and research it or whatever, that bit's fine. But you couldn't make those mistakes. And so it's been a long time for me to get to the point where I felt that I could, lay bare my history and be vulnerable about the mistakes I've made. As I say, some of them, weren't pleasant. I've had certainly, situations in business and personal life, not that that's in the book, that weren't pleasant, that were heartbreaking, that were, financially, destroying in some cases. In one case, to the extent that I almost went bankrupt. That's not something that sort of sat comfortably with me as a professional advisor to kind of say that in the bigger world. But I got to the point where I felt, you know what? I really need people to know that, yes, we are professional advisors. We do know a lot about what we know. But actually, as a chartered accountant in the tax field, we weren't taught how to run a business. The same way most business owners, 99.99% of business owners aren't taught how to run a business. We kind of go into business, all of us, accountants as well, with the dream of whatever this is, our business to be, but without the foundations. And so that's the reason I kind of took the bull by the horns. I actually wrote the book in 2019. It sat kind of languishing for a while. I kind of went, I'm not too sure about this going out in the world. And do I really want the whole world to know what I've done or what's happened? And so it sat for a while. And then I sort of picked it up again and said, no, I really got to do something with this. And then, went through another round of edits that I worked with you on it and pulled it together and made it looking the book that I wanted it to be. And it's still scary when I think about it.
Yeah,
You
it's
know,
interesting that point you make, that it's scary to be vulnerable. It's also scary to share your knowledge, and because once it's kind of out there, it's kind of out there.
yeah. I mean,
Um,
yeah,
yeah,
the knowledge that's the technical stuff, no, every day of the week, not an
yeah,
issue. But the sort of stories behind it, the lessons, that's a hard one. Yeah.
yeah, very much so. Now, how has your current book, and I guess your other books, helped you with growing your own business and your own brand over the years, but particularly over the last maybe 18 months? That'd be a great thing to hear from you.
Look, there is absolutely no question that people look at you differently once you're an author, and it is what one of my mentors refers to as a business card on steroids. It's got FUD value. It just changes your view, the view of other people have of you, not your own view, changes how other people perceive you. So what happens now is, I was actually at a conference and I was speaking, and it wasn't one where I really wanted to go on about my books. And the person who'd invited me to speak at the conference said, how many books have you written, Amanda? And I went, yeah, 4. And, um, and it's that whole credibility piece. And he wanted everyone else in the room to know that I wasn't just, what I was appearing to be at that moment, but there was so much more to me, and that I had a lot of other things, and people become very proud to be associated with you when you've written a book. But 4 books is kind of because I say crazy in my mind. It's still struggle to come to realize that I've actually written 4 books. But so what's happening is people come to me. I was recently approached by someone who was writing articles for American Express for some quotes to be put in not one but a couple of articles. I'm being approached now for my training programs to be put in on other platforms. The book just it's the credibility, big ticket credibility place. And rather than me going out and knocking on doors, they're coming knocking on mine. And that, I think, is the big switch that I've seen, particularly now. I think I've got that 3rd and 4th book. The first book was still a lot of knocking on doors, but still major credibility. With the book, it opened the door.
And that's an interesting point that you make about the kind of time it takes, because I often work with authors and they get so focused on the launch of their book, and by the time they've launched it, they're exhausted, because that's a big effort in themselves. And then I say to them, well, you've really got another 12 or 18 months to go. And they go, well, why didn't you tell me that sooner? I said, well, you were writing your book and publishing it. If I'd mentioned that up front, I think you would have run away. But I think the longevity piece, I think, is something that you're alluding to. And I guess connected to that for me is the question for you then is, how did you go about publishing your books? Because there's lots of different ways to do that these days.
Yeah, look, that's an interesting one, because I'm so independent. It's part of my nature. It's how I was brought up. In every fiber of my being, I'm massively independent. So I kind of go, well, do I want to put everything in the hands of sort of one company or group, to look after the whole process? And I'm like, no. So each one of the books, I've found an editor to work with, or 1 or 2 editors in some cases that we've worked with. So I've written it, pulled it apart, put it together in my own mind, dealt one-on-one with an editor, then looked at the publishing piece. Found a printer that I've worked with on a couple of the books now. So I've sort of piecemealed it, put it together. And whilst that's not for the faint-hearted, because it has meant that we've converted the book to Kindle, for example. I say we, one of my team, I won't say I've done it, but rather than paying someone a package fee to do the whole thing, we've kind of said, well, we can do some of this ourselves and save a bit of money. So I've kind of done it a bit not on a shoestring budget, I wouldn't say that, but certainly not spending tens of thousands of dollars to get the whole production done in one in one place. But it does mean there are things we probably miss out on, and things that we haven't done, in terms of distribution and things like that, that we have to put a bit more effort into ourselves.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've kind of piecemealed and got things together, kind of thinking.
Okay, but that's an interesting thing, because you can actually, as a kind of newbie or a medium kind of business author, that's possible. That's possible. Now, what was the hardest part about writing and publishing your books?
I'll say my first hardest part, because it's probably a bit of an odd one, and maybe I'll come up with a second version. My hardest part of writing and publish a book is coming up with a title.
Yeah.
To me, that's just the hardest thing. And I know some of my colleagues who've written, they got the title and then they've written the book behind the title. And it's like, yep, I've written the book, and people have said, oh, the title will come out when you're writing the book. It's like, get to the end of the book, I don't know what the title is. And of course, without a title, you can't do a cover, this whole thing. So for me, the title has always been the hardest part. And I spent months with the title of my first book, going around in circles. In the end, look, the title, and the problem with it is, and I think the reason I grappled with it so much, is the title is important, because it's kind of the reason that people pick up the book. I mean, yes, they might look at the cover as well. If you've got a crazy photo of yourself on the front cover, hopefully people might look it up. But if, I think you've got Unscrambled, my red, what I call my red book there. That covers, once we kind of worked out what it was, we then kind of figured out what the cover is. But yeah, so for me, the title is the hardest part. I think the second hardest part for me, and the bit that I disliked the most, was the backwards and forwards with the editing. I'm kind of one of these people that once I've written, it's kind of like done. And the backwards and forwards, and I find that quite trying, I would say, it's coming backwards and forwards, having to reread it 1,000 times, and then reread it again, and then read it again, and then read it again. I'm so over it. I don't, that bit I didn't enjoy, I suppose.
Yeah, it's and I've written a number of books, and yeah, it's a quite a disciplined process, and to try and always stand back from it and bring a new lens to what you've already written, and and so I often advise people to kind of not look at it for a couple of weeks, and if someone else is editing, that typically would happen, but it's very hard to keep fresh and keep a new set of eyes on things.
Yeah.
Next question. You're an Amazon bestseller, and I've got my own views about Amazon, but I'll put them to one side at the moment. Has this helped you market and promote your book? And if so, in what ways?
Yeah, look, I think, again, comes down to, and it depends on what you know about how the Amazon #1 bestseller works, but for a lot of the world out there, it's again another tick on credibility. I've been putting this latest book into a few awards. I'm looking to get some, if you like, some stronger credibility with an award on the book than the Amazon credibility. People in the know, it's kind of it's not as good as it sounds and it first sounds, but people that don't understand, it's a big credibility piece. So again, it's being able to put that sticker on the front of it of, I can't quite announce, but I believe I've got a gold medal award for the book from somewhere, but I've got an unofficial email on it. I haven't got the formal one, so
okay.
watch this space.
Watch this space. Okay.
So that would be super cool, because it's much more of an independent review. The Amazon's based on numbers of sold, and it doesn't. It doesn't. It's good, but it doesn't make it.
Yeah, on its own. Yeah.
on its own. Yeah.
And I guess as a business author, it'd be really interesting for the people listening to this. How do you actually currently use your current book and your previous books in your marketing and branding?
So in terms of using them, obviously they're available on my website. They're available on on Amazon at the moment. We still have to get our distribution out into the more mainstream booksellers, etc. At this stage, haven't done that bit yet. In terms of my marketing, so it's I guess the linchpin of it, because it's kind of the first step. Well, there's a lot of other material I have out there and on my website and around in various places, but it's sort of that first step. Buy the book, get a bit of an understanding of what I do, and then from there, it leads into the other work I do, the online courses, my coaching programs, and the other, and leads into potentially speaking gigs and other things, that workshops, those sorts of things. So it's very much a linchpin in it. I do send it out to people. This is a bit of a, depending who you talk to. Some people recommend sending it out, unsolicited, to journalists, to associations, etc. Other people say don't waste your money because all they do is throw it in the bin anyway. So it's that kind of balancing act of really trying to get a connection with someone first, and then be looking to send it to people that you already know or you've made a connection to, I think. So that's part of that bigger process. And so to me, it's a big linchpin in the promotion.
Right. Well, we're going to get to your promo for your book in a minute. So I'm going to go straight into kind of the quick quiz, and then we'll sort of have a bit of a heads up on Strangled by Numbers at the end of it. And so the quick quiz is just a kind of a fun little escapade around books and things.
Okay.
Okay, so here we go. So how do you read? Are you an ebook or a print book person?
Oh, print.
Pretty simple. Best place for reading, couch or bed?
Oh, it depends what I'm reading. If it's a business book, definitely not in bed, because I will never get to sleep. So anything else, fiction, other non-fiction, bed. But it's kind of when I do most of my reading, but couch for business books and any type of books really. But yeah, don't read a business book before you go to bed. Hilariously, somebody read one of my books and said they'd gone to bed reading the book, and their husband couldn't understand how they were enjoying reading this book in bed. I just thought that was the funniest thing.
We won't go there about their relationship, perhaps. Okay, marking up books. Are you a page folder, or do you write in books, or use some other method?
Oh, sacrilege! Writing in a book, turning down pages. My gosh, no, never. They have to be in pristine condition. So yeah, my mum was a librarian, so I kind of got taught, no, you do not write in a book, you do not fold down pages. And so yeah, if I am writing notes, then writing notes on a pad beside, but do not mark up a book. I've occasionally thought for a couple, maybe having a second copy that I mark up might be a way around that, but no.
Yeah, I've worked the way around that as I use tags, the post-it notes, but also the coloured tags.
Yes.
And but post-it notes I often use because you can write a word or a statement on it, so you can go back and find things quite easily. Is the way I've got around.
I post-it noted from time on when I've read on occasion, but most of the time I just read, enjoy, and maybe write some notes on the side.
Okay, reading style. You read a few, skip a few, or do you read from beginning to end?
Oh, beginning to end. Mind you, depends a bit on what it is, because there are some books that lend themselves more to perhaps diving into a particular area because it's more interesting. But as a general rule, yeah, start to finish.
Okay. Outside of business, are you fiction or non-fiction?
I'm a bit of both. Yeah. I'll confess to liking romances, so that's fiction. And and I love reading books on Canada where I grew up. So, a lot of, sorry, that was fiction. I'll get my head right in a minute. So my non-fiction, books on Canada or travel, those types of books. So yeah, a bit
Fantastic.
of both. Yeah, both.
Now, a really important one for me about sharing books. Are you a hoarder or a giver?
I'm a hoarder. I'm a massive hoarder. I kind of almost feel like I want to turn my camera around a little bit so you can see some of the walls lined with books in this house. And that's only a small portion. So massive hoarder. I can't help myself. If I see a good book, I want to buy it and I want to keep it.
Yeah, I'm very much the same. I fill up. I buy a bookcase and immediately fill it up because it's filled up with the books that I've had stacked, waiting for the bookcase. And then I'm now at a point where it's like, okay, I've got stacks of books. I better go and find another bookcase. But then I don't know where I'm quite going to put the bookcase. So
that's my problem. Yeah.
Yeah, very big problem for me. Writing style. Are you Oxford English, Australian English, or US English?
I suspect I'm Oxford English, and I think that goes back to my very early childhood in England. And I think I'm Oxford English. If not, I'm Aussie English. But yeah, Oxford, I suspect.
Okay. So that's our quick quiz. So thank you for that. It's given us a bit of an insight into you, Amanda. And before we go, of course, it wouldn't be a chat about a business book author unless we gave the opportunity to you to have a quick chat about your latest book. So could you give us perhaps the 3 most important messages that come out of your latest book, Strangled by the Numbers?
Okay, 3 important messages. So first message is that numbers don't lie. You mentioned that at the beginning. I think the numbers don't lie, and I guess part of that, maybe it's a different message, but it's just the importance of the numbers and knowing how to interpret them. I think that's probably the big message that I want people to understand from the book. It's not just what are the numbers, but what do they mean? Looking for the stories they tell, because I believe the numbers do tell a story, and if you delve into them a bit more deeply, you'll get a lot of insights into what's happening in your business, and that's so key. And I think the other thing that, and so if that's the second one, then the third one would be that there are different numbers that are important to look at in different situations. So, in the past period of time through COVID and business shutdowns and lockdowns and all sorts of, re-engineering businesses, there are specific numbers that were really important to be focusing on during those times that are not the same numbers that you might have been looking at 12 months before when your business was growing and or if you started in business. Like different situations do mean looking at different numbers. It's not just these are the numbers you need to look at, end of story. Circumstances do dictate which numbers to look at, and that information is definitely threaded throughout the book.
And that's an interesting comment you make, and I guess a kind of follow-up question from me is, I suspect some people like me in a younger age in business kind of didn't want to look at some numbers because we thought they might not be pretty. So it's kind of this game, well, as if I don't really look at them, I kind of won't have to face them. And really you have to overcome that fear of, if the numbers aren't telling you the story that you wish they would tell you, you're kind of better off getting into that sooner or later.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's, dare I say, my worst horror story in the book, which is at a time when I didn't look at the numbers. And yeah, I'm a numbers gal, so it's crazy that I didn't look at the numbers. I wasn't, because absolutely you're right. I was petrified. I knew it was bad. I just didn't know how bad it was, and I didn't want to know how bad it was. But the funny thing was, and look, and I get that I do understand what I'm looking at when I do look at the numbers, but when I did eventually take my head out of the sand and look at them, the path forward was clear as day. Like, it was just, this is what I have to do. I've got to do this, and this, and and claw those numbers back out of where they were. And looking back, probably if I'd done that 3 months before, I might not have got quite so far down that deep black hole as I'd got, because I would have seen it happening, so, knowing it was happening, but seeing it and being able to go, okay, I need to do this, I need to do that. And I may not have got into quite the, that close to bankruptcy that I was at that stage. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah. A lot of people don't like numbers, but
Yeah,
just
and
your
yeah,
friends.
and I think that's a really good place to kind of finish up on in that strangled by your numbers. I think is as I said, I learned a lot about kind of the ratios and also that whole thing is that they are your friend and they can help you, and even if they're not looking so great, that's a really powerful way to interpret what you potentially can do next, earlier rather than later.
Correct. Yeah.
So Amanda, thank you so much for your time this morning. As I said, I unfortunately didn't have your latest book. You can hold yours up, and this is the previous one. So thank you for your time. And if you would like to go and have a look at Amanda's book and buy it, you can go to her website, and I'll get Amanda to tell us what that is. And thank you again for your time, and look forward to maybe seeing book number 5 sometime soon.
Okay. The number 5, I'll just pass on that bit. And but yes, look, books available on my website, thecashflowqueen.com.
Fantastic.
So yeah.
Okay, Amanda, thank you very much, and look forward to catching up with you soon.
And thank you, Jackie, for having me. It's been great.
Okay, bye.
Bye.